Welcome back to another edition of Meet the Coach. Today we have Trey Shimabukuro, the Western Oregon QBs coach. I nailed that last name, didn't I?
Nailed.
Look at that. Even though we talked about it, we had you on to a full clinic. I heard the name. I went and rewatched it again today, and then also we talked about it. And I did it like 4 times before we recorded. But we're here. Talk to us a little bit about how you got to Western Oregon from Hawaii,
Yeah.
and what you're doing there now.
Yeah, so I came out, my dad went here actually back in the day, 78 through 82. So I came out of high school in 2010, played at Kauai High, was a part of some good teams there and some good coaching staffs. And then came out here to play football. And honestly, I really didn't have a choice. I was becoming a Wolf, and I was going to Western Oregon. I enjoyed that decision-making process, but, I knew it would make my dad really happy to see his old buddies here on campus and, all the alumni and things like that. So I came out here in 2010, stayed to the fall of 15, and then started coaching, that winter. Obviously, we're on a quarter system, trimester system. So that winter quarter, hopped right in to coaching quarterbacks. And, obviously, it was a blessing. I got thrown in the fire a little bit, and it was kind of, let's see what you're made of type deal. But learning on the fly, you're forced to get better every day, and you're forced to, take in new information, and whether it's, the motor learning perspective or the biomechanic perspective, you're forced to become creative and innovative. And I've been here ever since, and, slowly as I've progressed through whatever it is, 4 or 5 years now, I've gained a little bit more responsibility in terms of, the schematics of things, right? The X and O's and pass game, run game, RPO stuff. But yeah, man, I love it here. I really left the island and never went back,
Are you, so when you, in 2015, when you flipped over to coaching, were you a GA or were you a full-time QBs coach?
No, yeah. So I jumped in. I didn't have the opportunity to get my master's off the jump. We had 2 other GAs at the time. And we had a guy. So at the time, our OC was obviously the OC has been the same. So Brian Harris was my quarterback coach, and we had a couple of guys here and there that came back and coached quarterbacks, but for the most part, he was our guy. And my last year, we had our offensive coach leave for another job, so he went and took over that position. And so I came in, and it was just the way it worked out, man. It was perfect timing, and so I got kind of thrown into that. And obviously there's that element of let's see this guy prove himself a little bit, right? Like earn his stripes a little bit. But I enjoyed every second of it, man. I enjoyed breaking down film. I enjoyed all the quote unquote dirty jobs, right? Like I enjoyed that stuff, and still do. So
sure. What and watching your clinic, when you were talking, it was on maximizing accuracy and mobility. Was that, did I say that correctly?
Arm strength.
Yeah. But a lot of mobility within that, obviously.
Yeah.
Maximize. Yeah. So it was, but watching that, and obviously I sat and watched it for an hour, so I got a much more in-depth idea of how you think and teach. It was different. And I haven't seen a lot of coaches speak about it in the way you spoke about it. What would you say where'd you learn, and where do you continue to grow from? Being that you are the quarterback's coach, where else are you getting information from? And then also, what would you say your coaching philosophy, and how is it different on easy for me to say, on quarterbacks specifically?
Yeah. So I'll start with that. I'll start with the philosophy thing. For me, mechanics, at the end of the day, we're in the business of developing competence, right? In whatever field it may be, right? Your players need to be competent, right? Whether it's in communication skills. So, I can communicate with people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, right? Wherever I go, I can relate to people. And the communication is part of listening, right? Like it goes hand in hand. So, and I think listening is a very undervalued skill. But, and then for me, it was developing mechanics, and how do I give my guys the greatest chance to become successful and the greatest chance to earn confidence. And we talk about it, I talked about it in the clinic, where a lot of times guys, you hear coaches say, let's give this guy some confidence, well, I wish it was that easy, but for us, it's more of hey, let's put him in situations where he may fail, he may succeed, but he understands, right? He tries to keep this neutral thinking mindset, right? So he understands the situation. He understands that every play has a history of itself in itself. But he also understands that if he does succeed, here he will succeed on game day, or and whatnot. So everything for us was for me personally was developing our guys on and off the field, and obviously that's a broad statement, but you're talking from mechanics to leadership styles to communication skills, right? And different things that I think made a difference through my 5 years. And I think the last thing in terms of philosophy is concerned, I've always been a firm believer in competing, but not necessarily against somebody else or against something. It's not, and I do believe it has to be tangible, but I think competing against time, and when I say that, I mean, I have to be willing to put in more time than somebody else is willing to put in at the end of the day, right? Like whatever your profession is, if you truly want to become the best you can possibly be, you have to be willing to put in maybe an extra hour or something like that along the way throughout the week that gives you an edge. And, I started quarterback the last 2 years, kind of embraced that, and credit to him for buying into that. But basically, we lift in the morning and, they're thrown in the afternoon where, well, everybody in the country is doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if everyone's doing that, I got to find somewhere maybe from 12 to 3 or 12 to 4, maybe whatever it is, I got to find a time slot where I can get into the weight room and get some extra hip mobility and, the band stuff that we talked about. And
mm-hmm.
so it allows me to gain range of motion and mobility and stability and all these things, so that when I do go and throw, I can perform at a higher level than I'm used to performing at, essentially is what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can fix the things that mechanically I need to be fixed and all this stuff. Well, that to me, from a philosophy standpoint, that is like the biggest thing that our guys embraced the last 2 seasons is, we don't got these 4-star, 5-star cats, right? We don't got these dudes that are going to the league in 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for us is like, how do we be productive? Well, we got to be able to throw the ball. All right, well, where does that start, right? Let's recruit the athlete and let's teach him. Obviously, he has to have some sort of idea on how to throw the football, but let's teach him how to be efficient mechanically and make him the greatest passer he can be, and go from there. But in terms of learning about mechanics, the first part of the question, you see a bunch of different guys do it, right? So how it all started was with Coach Vinny, and obviously back home in Hawaii, and then got to know Coach Clarkson a little bit. How it started from there, because I've always wanted to be a coach. I've only played college football because I thought that was the precursor to becoming a college football coach. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I had never had dreams of playing, in the CFL or NFL, none of that. I wanted to play college football so I could coach college football. And, I've always said that. I've always said, I don't remember Coach Brennan, right, at the University of Hawaii. I've always wanted to be June Jones more than I wanted to be Coach Brennan, right? Like that was
I remember
always
you
the
saying
goal.
that at the clinic, yeah.
Yeah, and that was always the goal. And now that I'm here, it's a blast. And I look forward to learning from different quarterback, quote unquote, gurus, right? And you take what you like, and obviously, at the end of the day, it's a copycat business. And, I enjoy that part, the research part of it, right? See the motor learning side, the research articles on the motor learning side. And, obviously, honestly, using our strength coach, Coach Metzger, who you ought to get her on here at some point. She's really, really good at what she does and understanding how the body moves and picking her brain on that too. And then, the kinesiology professors or exercise science professors on campus, they have a wealth of knowledge as well. So it's just using your resources. And honestly, it's getting over the fact of somebody saying, sorry, I can't, you know what I mean? Like, sorry, I don't have time. It's like, all right, whatever.
Yep. I get that.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Who do you think's the coach you learned the most from? If you got to pick one, who would that be?
Man, honestly, I would say, I grew up playing for my dad in a lot of sports. Well, really all 3 sports. And, a lot of times he was a lot harder on me than my friends and teammates. And maybe, some people may call it old school or whatever. But, looking back on it, man, I never appreciated it as much as I should have, and you look back on it like, man, that I learned a lot, playing for him and him, being hard on me and holding me accountable and those types of things. Everyone uses buzzwords nowadays, but basically holding me responsible and allowing me, to understand what failure is and understand what success is, and how to handle both with humility. I think that, I mean, honestly, looking back on it, I would have to say my dad. And there's been some awesome coaches, throughout high school and things like that. But I would have to go with my pops.
It's a good one, right? It's a good one. You're lucky to probably have had that then.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for a young Trey getting in the coaching game? So you go from a player right into coaching. What advice do you have for that dude?
Man, I think patience. I think early on as a player, you're so result driven. You're 20, 21 years old, and right, and us being millennials, right? Like, it's instant gratification. Like, let me get results now, right? And as a player, when you don't get results, or when you don't get reinforcement, you get impatient, and you lose focus of the big picture. And then as a young coach, it was like, my first season, we started out beating Sac State, right, down there in Sacramento, and I'm thinking like, oh my, this is fun, and then we lose, I think, the next 5, and so I'm thinking like, man, and the reason why I say patience is because a lot of times when you're so result driven and you get a loss, right, you go and beat Sac State, and you get, next game you're at home, it's sold out crowd, and you get smoked by Central Washington, you start reevaluating, thinking like, man, what can I do differently, when maybe what you're doing is you're on the right track, and you're headed in the right path. You just don't know it.
Sure.
It's you're trending, right, but you just don't know it because you're taking L's. And honestly, I'm still learning how to detach from outcomes. I know that's a famous buzzword, right, people use, but I'm still learning to enjoy the individual sessions, right? The 30 minutes of individual sessions. I'm still learning to enjoy making people better. Let's gain range of motion today by a degree. Let's see if we can do that, and then see where we're at the next day. And I've learned to enjoy those things. But man, patience. That's definitely what I would say. I'd still say.
Sure. That's a good one for anyone doing anything ever, right?
Right.
All right, last one. I'll get you out on this. I like to finish with this one. The one coach you've worked with, or you've never worked with, but would want to work with in the future. I think I know the answer. No, you've already.
There's 2 of them. Now,
okay.
The reason why, so I mentioned June Jones earlier, and
that's why I thought you were going to right too. All right,
and no doubt, he's coached some of the greatest quarterbacks, and ran some of the most prolific offenses, and whatnot. But I honestly would go Mouse Davis. I think the quote unquote the godfather of the run and shoot, and Mouse that roars, I believe, is in what the movie's called. It should come out soon, the documentary. But Mouse is always around. When we have home games and things, he'll come to every one of our games, and he still carries some juice. I think the dude like 88 or 86 or something like that, and
still rocking.
He's still edgy, man. He's still still gets fired up and is on the sideline and wants to be involved. And I've always wanted to pick a dude's brain like that and work for him, because I want to know what went through his head when he was creating the run and shoot, right? Like, what's the why? Like, what made you say, hey, we need to throw the ball 60 times a game? And how did you start that process? How long was trial and error? And that type of stuff. And, I think he changed football. I mean, forever, right? I mean, all these concepts people are doing now that, maybe are quote unquote air raidy, you could argue, was born or is a runoff of the run
derivative, if nothing else.
And so I think Mouse Davis, hands down, would be fun, man. It'd be fun.
Yeah. I bet. I had a G when I GA'd one of the coaches, our defense coordinator at the time at Ashland University, Tim Rose, was 71, and then he turned 72 as I was coaching for him. And that dude had as much energy as anybody else. He's still coaching. He's in. So I was in there last year. It was 2010, early 80s. This dude's coaching linebackers. Oh yeah.
Right. You got to appreciate it, man. I mean, it's it's a skill, man. Bringing that type of energy in every day. I mean, it's
no doubt.
No, I would have to go with Mouse, man. I don't know too many people who would say that, but I would have to go with Mouse, man. That guy's he's awesome. So
I dig it. All right, Trey. We appreciate your time.